Order the Planning and Zoning Special Meeting of Thursday, August 8th, 2019. It is now 7 p.m. And if everyone would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Rudy.
Commissioner McGraw.
Here.
Chairwoman Nesser.
Present.
Commissioner Uli.
Present.
Commissioner Hanchey.
Here.
Vice Chair Heck.
Present.
Commissioner Howard. Madam Chair, Commissioner Howard did let us know he would not be able to attend tonight. Commissioner Kreidler.
Here.
6 present. We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the agenda as presented.
We have a, wait just a minute. Oh. I don't get what you're, yeah, but what about it?
Okay, I got it wrong.
We thought we had a mistake here. Okay.
Oh my, we don't make mistakes here.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Yes.
Commissioner McGraw.
Yes.
Chairwoman Nesser.
Yes.
Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanchey.
Yes.
Vice Chair Heck.
Yes.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll move on to the old business, which is presentation and discussion of the proposed 2020 general plan.
Good evening, Commission. Tonight we'll be covering Chapter 7, the circulation element, Chapter 8, the water element, Chapter 9, the growth area element, and the last chapter will be the cost of development. In front of you, we have the Chapter 7 circulation element. It's really a summary of the active transportation plan and how we're going to implement that. It also talks about a little bit of our shortcomings due to the city being developed prior to it being a city, and some of the streets are substandard, so we're kind of working at a backwards pace to try to address those. It also talks about any new construction south of baseline is going to implement all the ATP, the Active Transportation Plan guidelines. It also talks a little bit about the SR-24 and when that's going to be built. It also talks about all the new construction that's going to happen in the state land within the next 5 years or so, and how we have to address that through the Active Transportation Plan.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Kreidler.
Sydney, no, I noticed on here that the SR-24 is to be extended to Ironwood by 2022. I hadn't actually heard a date. That's accurate? And the Goldwater Institute isn't involved in any of that issue with the tax that's under debate?
Larry, do you know I think 2022 was supposed to be the start date of that construction?
I was told I can't talk tonight because I make the meeting longer and I don't say anything anyway.
Who said that, Larry?
I think I heard it more than once. My understanding, and that's why there's interest in this state land that is kind of south of Elliott all the way to the 24. Queen Creek just did an annexation of state land and amended their general plan to accommodate that. But I understand that it's funded in ADOT's plan to go to Ironwood. So the EISs are done, and that's very short time from now. So as far as we know, it's going to be
Okay.
done.
Because when I saw that, I'm like, wait a second, I hadn't heard any of that yet. This is new. So I just wanted to get that
Yeah,
clarified.
and I think the development interest we're hearing is that they kind of want to coincide rooftops with when that road opens.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Lastly, we have the goals and policies. It really talks about how we need to implement our capital improvements project, and then how we need to, we've already implemented the active transportation plan, but we need to follow the active transportation plan going forward. And then we have the exhibits in terms of the classification, street classifications, and the transportation map in the back of the chapter. Any comments or concerns regarding this chapter?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I did have Did want some explanation or summarize the capital improvement projects plan, the 10-year plan. I didn't see anything spelled out on that. And if it was there, I guess I missed it.
I don't think we have any detail in terms of the capital improvements plan. Capital improvements plan is just a plan how we're going to address street projects and things like that. I think that's underway from the Public Works is in charge of that. And one of the policies is to finalize the capital improvements project plan. So, what streets are priority, how we're going to do that, how it's going to be funded, et cetera.
Okay.
So we did have a consultant that used to prepare the city's capital improvements plan every year. I think we're bringing that in-house. But a lot of it's just a plan because some of these projects they're not funded. So they're a list of things to do, and until we get money through MAG, then they can proceed, or we make application for a project. So if you went to the council meeting Tuesday night, you'd see Shane made a bunch of presentations about road maintenance, but also major projects like Southern and Winchester south of 16th to go all the way to Southern. So we have a capital improvements plan. It's hard to implement because we don't have a steady, secure source of funding.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone?
Also, transit, we got a lot of comments on transit. That's why we kind of made a little paragraph here to explain it. So that's why we had on the survey, and when we've talked to people, transit's a big deal, but we're kind of 8 miles from a bus stop, and we cannot get any monies for operating. So like Coolidge has a bus system. They got theirs started when they were, quote, rural. We've now moved from rural in Pinell County into urban. So had we started one before we went into the MAG region, we could have brought those operating dollars with us. So MAG only has money to buy buses, capital. So that's kind of where until a demand happens, it's very difficult. But we did get a lot of comments on the survey about transit and the lack of transit and why it's important for people's mobility, especially seniors and stuff. So we did want to make sure we had something in here about that.
Larry, I have one question for you. Just before I left today, I was looking online, and the Independent has posted that about the city annexing about 6,500 acres,
6,700, I think it ended up being, I think.
whatever the
Yes.
number.
Yeah.
Is that going to affect any of this and change anything?
We'll talk about it in the land use element, but I think as far as the transportation plan, we really have those standards that were applied. So as Sydney mentioned, the map has those cross-sections for south of the 60.
Okay,
So we had the downtown streets, and then maybe there's one more exhibit that's south of the 60 that maybe we got to add. But no, we're basically, we've adopted this. We told everybody when we adopted the active transportation plan, we're going to incorporate it in here. So that is how we did that.
okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Anyone else regarding this chapter?
Anybody else? No. The only thing I had, let me see, I had one thing on the third, on chapter 7, the third page, the 7.41, where it's talking about promoting solar-powered electronic vehicle charging stations. Do we still have them up at the MGC? Are they still in use? Are we gonna have more? Do you know, or anything like that?
There's not really a demand right now.
Okay. I mean, I didn't think so, but, I didn't know what
Yeah, there were
kind of
some
plans.
grants. Volkswagen kind of got burned with their diesel stuff, and I think the school district got some money through that Volkswagen program to get, I think they might be hybrid buses or something like that, but the city and its fleet, actually, we sold the one electric vehicle that we had, so. But the public uses it, and I think that's what we mean by promoting it.
Okay, well, it didn't go into any detail, and I was just kind of curious what exactly was happening with it. Okay, move on.
Okay, chapter 8 is the water resources element. We're calling it the AJ1H2O. Really, it's a comprehensive approach of how to address surface water, groundwater, wastewater, potable water, recycled water, water runoff, and stormwater as a single asset type. So we're really bringing all those water types really under one document and one management philosophy. This chapter covers a lot of information, everything from our water providers to Arizona water law, to our local climate in terms of background terrain. Talks about where we get our water in terms of water supply and demand here. It goes a little bit more in depth in terms of that one water concept, in terms of how we manage all those asset types under one management style. Let's see. And it breaks down really those assets types through these sub-chapters, or there's these subsections here that you have in front of you. And then at the end, we're emphasizing the importance of sewer and water, and the two water providers working together, and the engineering of how we manage water collectively. And then we have the goals and policies at the end.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Sydney, would it be safe to say that this general plan is trying to create one entity to supply water to the city?
I wouldn't say it's one entity in terms of combining perhaps the water district and AJ Water, the water company, but it's really getting on the same page, having both the water providers be on the same page in terms of how we address water as really an asset and not a liability going forward.
So you can't really merge the sewer district and the water district. I mean, at some point, the city, if it decides to become or have utilities, they have to vote on that. I think now it's in the council work program for 2022, if the time is right, but the voters have to approve basically taking over the assets of the water district or the sewer district and making them utilities. In terms of Arizona Water, that would be a bigger hurdle perhaps to buy out a private water company, but as that's how the sewer district was created, though, as I understand it, was a private sewer company or more than one, and then it wasn't going anywhere, and the city had to come in and step in. But in terms of just the concept of stormwater, historically, we've just tried to get rid of it. But Frank Blanco, who just retired last week, and Mike and them, they're working on like a recharge facility on the east side of the canal. So right now, state law doesn't allow you to recharge stormwater. You can recharge sewage effluent. You can take water out of the CAP canal and recharge it and get long-term storage credits, et cetera. But over time, is there a possibility of maybe keeping some stormwater and changing state law and allow you to recharge, keep it here instead of sending it down a concrete ditch to Mesa? So those are just all those concepts of conservation, this thing we talked about before, low impact development, trying to keep stormwater kind of around here instead of sending it downstream. It's just thinking of water as just water. And that's really what Frank Blanco had a big influence in putting this in here, that we shouldn't be thinking of water in these different ways.
Question, do our developers have to submit to you folks a stormwater pollution prevention plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So they have to have all the practices in their engineering design plan?
Erosion control,
Okay.
stormwater pollution prevention, track out pads, putting in, swales or
Right.
wattles, all that
Right.
stuff is in there,
Okay.
yep. Every
Thank you.
single commercial development and subdivision type development.
Also have another question. You indicated in the plan that Apache Junction water providers must comply with the assured water supply rules, which require that water providers prove a 100-year supply of renewable water, blah, 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 before any additional residential development occurs. So the way I read that is that developers have to have an assured water supply, and do they have to have that assurance from a state agency?
Yes.
What is that? What's that?
Before the plat can be recorded, this is the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, and then there's administrative rules that go with that. So before the final plat comes to the council, we have an assured water supply. Now, the water district, the Apache Junction CFD, already has that. They are an assured water supplier. For Arizona Water, every single development, they're not an assured water supplier, so every single development has to get a certificate from ADWR.
Okay,
But you can't record a plat in Arizona. Even a commercial plat like Fry's, this was kind of news to me, 7-lot subdivision, but it was a commercial subdivision, they had to get an assured water supply. And in that case, it was Arizona Water, but they have to prove that they have an assured water supply.
thank you.
I have 2 questions for you, somebody, under stormwater section. Okay, this second paragraph, second from the bottom sentence. The goal of the city is to encourage designers and developers to utilize these standards. What do you mean by encourage? Just, would you please do it, but if they don't, you don't do anything about it?
You jump up and down, that's kind of the old phrase.
I mean, seriously, they're just, they're not obligated to,
Right now, we don't have stormwater quantity again versus stormwater quality. So there are rules and regulations for the MS4 permits, the municipal combined sewers. The cities over certain sizes had to have MS4 plans and all that stuff. So that's quality. In terms of quantity, we do have requirements in our engineering standards for north of baseline versus south of baseline to hold back certain storm events. So north of baseline, it's 10-year, 24-hour. South of baseline, it's like a 100-year, 2-hour, I think, event. So public projects associated with, yeah. So that's just the low-impact development, though. So there are engineering requirements already on the books, but they're not tied into that concept of low-impact development, meaning having rain gardens and swales that can, take out some of the pollutants before it goes downstream. So right now, we don't have rules and regulations requiring low-impact development techniques. They're generally out there because we have a landscape code that calls for xeriscape. But right now, it's an encouragement until I think it's probably going to come over time. That in a master plan community, I think we can do more than encourage it. We can require it. If it's a PD, we can make it a requirement. If it's general zoning, it's more of, hey, you really ought to think about that.
okay. And then in the next, under the planning considerations, let me see what my question was. In order to be said, both water providers and the city must, it says, to be successful, both water companies and the city and external water managers must work together. Now, what does that mean exactly? I mean, is there a law that says they've got to, or is it just another, they're encouraged? I mean, what's out there? You say you have no control over a private water utility, but it says that they must work together.
To keep that concept in mind. So it is working with the Maricopa County Flood Control District, CAP, City of Mesa, Queen Creek, other folks that manage water, or the sewer district. It's saying maybe we have to educate people about, because right now people just think of drinking water. And so again, I think the missing element is stormwater. And stormwater we retain as much as we can on site. It does percolate for the on-site detention basins. You have to hold back that storm. But the rest of it just goes downstream and causes problems for somebody else. But if there is a way to keep it here, again, this is kind of a big picture concept that rather than sending, the idea is if stormwater, we send it to Mesa, and they figure out a way, or they work with state government, and now they start recharging stormwater that emanated up here, why don't we think about that? Yeah. And I think those are some concepts that now Mike Loggins, I think, and with Frank are taken to the flood control district and other entities.
Okay. I just-
Madam Chair?
Yes,
So, on the section water supply and demand, number 3, the build-out projection, I'm just curious, has the population estimated at 140,000? Now, there's no projections, I mean, I think we were looking at the projections to be around, by 2040, to be around 56,000, and even if you factor in winter visitors, is that just they just take a number and just really boost it up so it?
No, but that's build-out. That's if all this land down here got developed. Doesn't say when, so that could be in
Oh, you mean
2080 or,
all
yeah, beyond the
500?
projections that.
Oh.
Yeah, beyond projections we would get from the Census Bureau or the State Demographer or MAG or anybody,
All
yeah.
right, because, that makes sense. I just thought, boy, you guys are very optimistic.
You're in a dream.
around here?
Yeah, okay, all right.
Take
Okay,
the
any
needle
more,
out of your arm, right?
any more
Take the
questions
needle out of
on?
your arm.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I noticed in goal 8.2, number 1, referencing the developing, participating in public education, water harvesting, xeriscape, and other water conservation. Do we have anything in place or in the works for water harvesting for the general public and their private residents?
There's nothing that the city has now, but I know that other entities like the U of A Extension and some of those, there are people that are having rain barrels in their yards, but there's nothing formal. You know, where you have gutters on your house, you're trying to collect it, using it to water your garden in the winter, whatever it might be. So there's nothing formal that I know of.
But that kind of,
Those techniques have been out there for a long time.
just as far as that developing or participating kind of leads me to believe that we might be looking at doing something like that, a public program in the future, maybe either through Parks and Rec or whoever.
Demonstration project even. So again, the city itself could, like right now, we do have the Think Water project down at the Flatiron Park. Those are the types of things we're talking about, where we're trying to, and actually Frank came up with this idea when we were doing Flatiron Park. They actually have an easement that's recorded on the park that I think it is like a rain garden, but it's like a permanent easement. That was like their contribution, because we were looking for contributions, and the sewer district made a $10,000 contribution. We got some contributions from Arizona Water. We actually put a deed restriction on the park that relates to like a water conservation demonstration area. So I think we have on a small scale, but this just says if they're out there, we should educate people about it.
Okay.
And I think more of it you hear about, like at the garden, when they do the ladybugs, the city could have a booth there and talk about, water reuse and gray water reuse. I think, again, you hear a lot about this in other states where they have the purple pipe and you can only use that for irrigation. That's water that's, right now we're recharging it, but in other places they're using that water for just watering plants, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Anybody else? Would you like to proceed?
Okay. We will go to the growth area elements. I have, so really this chapter talks about the future expansion of the city. With the increase in population, we're going to need additional housing, commercial and industrial areas to support the community. And then we have the future growth areas identified here for a total of 5. We have the downtown redevelopment area. We have the U.S. Highway 60 corridor. We have Lost Dutchman Vistas. And then we have the Old West Highway corridor and the rural residential. And then accompanied with this chapter, we have the map that outlines those areas. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here. In the planning considerations, it talks about
Shouldn't Gold Canyon be number 6 or something?
Yeah, that'll go over well.
Just
Yeah,
kidding, just
like a
kidding.
lead
For
balloon.
for the listening audience.
Oh, you tar and feather, you would run you out of town on a rail.
Tarred and feathered.
You tarred and feathered to boot.
In the planning considerations, it talks a little bit about how the departments and the city needs to work together in terms of how to address growth in these areas. And then we have the 4 goals associated to this chapter at the end. Any questions regarding this chapter?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
So I guess, is this the place where we would discuss what Tess was talking about from the independent, about the annexation of that land? Is that the,
No, that's way more than 6,700 acres. So if you hover the mouse, Sydney, from Elliott over to Gold Canyon, that's what's already in the city, and that, I think, is about 7,700 acres. That does not include the industrial park. Generally speaking, I thought that was about 70.
Inside city limits, yes.
Yeah, I think it's about 11 square miles or something like that. Then the annexation, or the potential annexation, is west of the canal and south of Elliott.
oh,
Where?
so the land there that's north of Elliott, that is already annexed to the city?
Correct.
Oh,
So
I don't
show
think I
me,
knew that.
with your little arrow there, where is this 6,500 that they just mentioned
It's in
today?
this,
Which is it?
it'll be in this area here where the.
This over
covering
here,
from-
okay. Elliott to down to,
What
To
is
the
it?
SR 24
Blue
alignment.
area, green area, where?
see the thingy, the star moving?
So it's from Elliott to the SR 24 alignment to the canal here,
Okay,
And
to the
down here?
canal
That's
to
6,500.
Meridian.
67.
6,700
and
acres.
change,
Okay.
Just
67
that,
and change.
oh, it's not clear up to the 60 then, okay.
And so we have annexed, the city has annexed that?
No,
Up to the 60.
Madam Chair.
from
So-
Elliott
Wait a minute.
up to the 60,
Oh, right, no, I mean.
or baseline road, I guess, from Elliott to
They
baseline,
have, okay.
that's
Okay.
already in the city limits.
Right,
So what the state land commission, or whatever it's called, what's it called,
Okay.
Joel? The something board,
State land selection board.
State Land Selection Board, on their agenda last month, approved an agenda item that the state could bring forth an annexation from Elliott to the canal down to the future SR 24 over to Meridian.
Okay, gotcha.
okay.
That,
Steve.
I was gonna say that SR 24, the future alignment area, is right around, it's gonna be in the general vicinity of the ET Motor Park, if you're familiar with
Okay.
that.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah,
the
it's
other
about taking Ironwood down towards Santan Valley.
Right,
That SR 24 alignment is gonna be just in that, just south of the ET Motor Park, in that general area. So.
Yeah, we have a
for
different
landmark
east-
purpose.
East of Ironwood, it's 90% agreed upon, where it actually is gonna dip down and go over to the, I think that's in a different element, I guess, but, so it may or may not go straight east all the way, keeping that alignment. It may dip down, it could, so it is for sure up to Ironwood.
Question,
But the annexation, or what could be annexed, is that, is it Williams Field alignment, or what was the alignment, Fry Road, or what
Fry
is it?
Road.
Fry Road
Fry Road.
alignment is that section, I think it's a section line.
not to sound greedy or.
Midsection? Midsection line.
Not to sound greedy or anything, but this annexation that was in the paper, or, today, talked about this from Elliott to the 24 and from Meridian to the canal. How did how did that come about? Is that all the city asked the state to allow us to annex?
Yeah, that's a good question.
No, the process is a developer is interested in buying state land. So the state says, well, we might put something at auction. The state says, well, the first step, I think the state hired a consultant and did some very high-level planning. And they came up with a document, talked about feasibility, and they called us, this consultant. And then from there, the state said, oh, okay, I guess that sounds okay. And goes back to the developer and says, yes, we may be interested in selling some of this. We want you to kind of drill down more on a larger area. So I think kind of just following that canal up over to baseline. So from Meridian to the 24, following the canal, even though some of it's in the city already, it's state land. And say, okay, come up with some densities, intensities, again, some very high-level planning. And then at some point, the state says, we're gonna put a certain amount of land at auction. So we don't
wasn't
know
this-
exactly, we don't know exactly what the auction piece, we have a general idea of what it might be. and it might be later this year, might be early next year. There's things to work out, but the state says, okay, we're gonna put at auction X acres.
But it wasn't the city going to the state asking.
City has been going to the state
Oh,
several times a year saying, are you gonna ever open up some of this land?
okay.
The difference is that the original thought was it was gonna be kind of north and east of the landfill. So the developer years ago, where the state put up 1,000 acres, that was, between Tomahawk and I guess Goldfield, that shaped area, maybe it was a little bit west. So that's where the city always thought, but you may know that there's a lot of stuff happening in southeast Mesa, Queen Creek, in the Eastmark area. You got Google or whatever over there. That's the 24 got built.
Yep.
So the real estate market changed, if you will, and developers thought that there's a better or a demand in this area as opposed to what the city always, because there was a demand off the 60, but as far as it goes, I think Dan Kaufman's new project may signal some things to the state, and maybe because there's a freeway already there, that may come back to life. If a developer, that's all it takes, is you go down there, you knock on their door and said, hey, I'm interested in this 1,000 acres. How do we get some conversation going? But it seems to take, even the current conversation is well over 3 years. And then whether you miss the real estate cycle or not, so.
Question, how does this work as far as getting the state people, state trust land, whoever, to let us annex, whether there's a developer involved who wants to buy it or not? Can't we just go to them and say, like you have on this map here, number 3, clear over underneath Gold Canyon? Can't we just
tried.
say, we want to annex
Yeah,
all of
but they're
that?
the petitioner, right? So as the property owner, they get a bigger say in it than we do. So we suggested that they do all that, but they're content with,
Little bits at a time.
well, Rudy will tell you, I think took 15 annexations just to get down to Elliott. Different pieces, the state annexation law changed. It's the state.
What's the
Screwy.
state's reasoning for
Yeah.
doing it
They don't want to give
little?
up the land?
I don't know in terms of annexation for us, I mean, they don't pay property tax, I don't believe.
That's what I mean, what
but
difference does it
Yeah,
make
what
to
does
them
it-
whether we
yeah.
annex this,
It-
all of number 3?
This is our planning area, as long as they don't fuss about the planning area, does it really matter when it happens, I guess, I don't know.
Well, they really believe that it's their land, they decide when it gets sold, they decide when it's ripe, and that's how it's been since
Well,
I've been here, 22 years, that's how they have handled, and it is their land, and they have a constitutional mandate to make sure they get the best and highest price for the schools, mostly.
No, I understand that about selling it, but what difference does it make whether we just annex it all?
Because they want to pick who the developer will be before they make that deal.
Oh,
That's why.
okay.
Why couldn't we make that same deal to developers if we had?
Well, you could, but then the developer still has to go to the state land department and convince them, our development's going to be better than any other development.
That's bad.
So in this case, they've agreed to annex another
Chunk.
10 square miles, but they decided that the AP Canal is a good boundary for now.
Now, is that going to go to Apache Junction?
Yeah, that's what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's what they're
Right.
talking about.
Yeah,
Even though it doesn't have a developer yet.
I just want to make sure that we have, that this is an agreement that isn't going to go south.
well, there's no agreement yet. The
Okay.
state board had took a vote and said, yeah, we think this should be annexed to AJ. Now, the next thing is to work with that developer and then proceed with the annexation.
But there is a developer that is,
Yeah,
okay, so you can't annex anything without a developer being,
Not for state land,
Present.
correct.
okay.
Okay.
that's how they operate.
I mean, the only reason I bring that up is that thing. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with this, but when we got permission to become a city, there's an agreement between us and Maricopa County or Mesa, which is it? We can't go west of Meridian, but Mesa
Well, I
can,
think that happened after the
but they
incorporation.
can come east,
Exactly.
and they can come right underneath us and take all of
Move
this,
right up.
and there's nothing to stop them because the agreement was only that we can't go west.
So Mesa could come in and
Yeah, they can,
and
Swoop it up.
if we don't annex this, they could
negotiate
come underneath here and the state clear up to Gold Canyon, all of that can end up being part of
The
Mesa.
hope is that people have been honoring that meridian. So it seems like people have honored that since the
Well.
strip annexation. So we've not heard any inkling that they're gonna try to swoop in, so I
We
don't wanna.
can keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, I don't want people to get the impression that that could happen tomorrow. I don't think that is likely.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
yes.
one item here on the goal 9.1, number 1, as far as policy, develop into a shopping destination for the region. Can we add entertainment to that? Because that seems to be kind of limiting to just shopping. And if we could provide sources of entertainment, dining, et cetera, to present the whole package for the region, I think that's a much better way of presenting it.
Or is there a better word than shopping to encompass everything you just said? Good point.
Sure, it could be like a,
Say retail or
a
something?
regional commercial destination.
Regional commercial destination. But I think entertainment is good to add entertainment in there, though.
Well, I just think of the different areas. I mean, I remember what Gilbert used to be like, and now they've got their Old Town area, and that's developing into a very nice entertainment district. You know, why can't we have something like that here? We can. And I don't think we need to set our sights short at just retail. I think we need to look higher. You know, you shoot for the stars and reach the moon, you know, you're doing good.
We would, absolutely. Thank you.
I had kind of a question here, and I don't know if it applies, but talking financial mechanisms, is it AJ ever gonna possibly look into, or can we, including in our sales tax from like online sales and all stuff like that?
I think that's happening with that U.S. Supreme Court case.
I think they,
Well, there's been some changes in state law. The legislature did not like that Supreme Court case. And they don't want the cities and towns to be able to tax like that Supreme Court case allows. So there's now some restrictions on how to do that, and they're very complicated under Title 42. So the city can't just go out there and take that case, say, hey, we've got the Supreme Court case, even though that's the true law of the land, but the state does have the ability to restrict that. So there has been changes in the last legislative session that actually does change and does restrict us. So it was a battle in the legislature, a pretty nasty one.
Plus, wasn't there the thing where, was it the realtors had something? Wasn't there something on the ballot that we can't tax certain
It went back and forth on some.
professions or something?
Yeah, and some of that failed, but maybe next year there's going to be another amendment. And legislature does not like cities and towns. That's just the bottom line. However, that's changing because the makeup of the legislature, it tends to be Democrats like cities and towns, Republicans don't. That's a generalization, but that is, if you look at the voting record, that's how it turns out. So that may be changing. Some of the balance of power is going to change in the next in the next election.
I have another question, but I missed my note. It's back on
Can't go backwards, only
keep
forward.
it, oh,
chapter 10, second page.
wait, we're not on 10
Oh, you're
yet.
going forward,
We're
okay.
not
Oh,
on 10
wait a
yet.
minute, where are
We're
we?
not on 10.
Right, go ahead.
We're on 9. We're just finishing, we're finishing.
Oh, I jumped ahead then, that's why my note's still
Yeah, I
there.
wondered.
Okay,
She going here.
We can do chapter 10 if
No,
you're
no.
ready.
that's why my note was still there, I thought I had missed it, okay. I'll wait till we get there.
Okay.
I think we're probably ready.
Anyone else regarding Chapter 9? Okay. So now we have Chapter 10, Cost of Development. The intro notes kind of our history in terms of how we handle fees and and revenue. The city has historically led a pretty conservative approach towards expenditures. And then it talks about their financial mechanisms of how we attain revenue and possible other possible avenues for funds. A lot of detail here in this table. Let's see. The planning considerations talk about, because we rely so heavily on sales tax, the possibility of implementing a municipal property tax. We've talked about that in previous chapters and the importance of that. I believe that one of the, in fact, I think policy goal 1 is to explore the possibility of implementing a minor property tax to diversify the funding and accelerate city-initiated improvements such as public safety, parks, streets, and other municipal services.
Madam Chair.
Yes?
Yeah, I read that when it said minor. What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, I think keeping it minor is a vague term, and that we've kept on purpose because that's through the exploration of this funding mechanism, we'd find out, what that number, what would be appropriate, So it's.
We talked a little bit about last time, so in Queen Creek, they do have a property tax that's for public safety, and how the public safety is generally viewed more positively than, the Development Services Department. So we're gonna create a property tax to fund us, but I think that's just kind of testing the waters.
And this has to go to the voters.
Pardon me? Yeah, I
This
think,
has to go to the voters.
Property tax?
right. Yeah, there would be a campaign behind it, just like last year, the city did the permanent base adjustment, which again, maybe was a mystery to people, but I think the city explained it very well, and it passed. Instead of spending $40,000 every 4 years, just do this once, and it saves the
Over and
taxpayers
done with.
I think that's
a little bit of money over time.
I think that's a good.
So if you
change.
want
That's a
to
good
change it to major property tax, or you want to just take it out, or, we're open to that, but I think just the idea, people from other states are very familiar with property tax, but here it's different. Or if you already do pay property tax to the county, the school district, and the fire district. And again, because there's a fire district tax, the city, that isn't a municipal service we provide, most cities have to fund fire, and so if they do have property tax, it would be higher. So maybe our property tax would be lower because obviously people are already getting taxed for that service.
Okay, now to my question.
We're ready.
On the second page, under the Community Facilities Districts, down at the bottom under the chart. Now, first of all, I'm not a finance person. Will never pretend to be, okay? So some of this is totally foreign to me. But at the bottom of this finance mechanism for this CFDs, it talks about the last sentence, CFDs are used for large master plan communities and may not be feasible for smaller subdivisions and residential projects typically found in Apache Junction. I don't know what that means exactly, but the thought that popped into my head was, why not combine all the smaller subdivisions into one entity of sorts to raise the funds to fix the streets and sidewalks? Does that make any sense to you? Because I'm not sure what this all means to ask you the correct question.
Right. So, go ahead, Sydney.
I think these subdivisions are, when the community facilities district is established, they are charged specifically to that subdivision. So, grouping these subdivisions may be pretty difficult because they're not located at the same place. And those funds are probably specific to the location of where they're located in the city. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're saying you can't take this little subdivision here and
And
this little
charge
one
another
here
subdivision
and there
that's.
and make them like on
Correct.
paper like one entity.
That's right.
Okay.
So I think that also relates back to the state land. So there is discussion, you know, is this gonna be served by maybe the sewer district, right now, and the water district? Or do they create a separate CFD? And then once the assets are built, then they can turn that over to our CFD. So sometimes developers will create one just to get their project going, but it is for a larger development, because there may or may not be utilities nearby, and then over time, there might be an agreement with the city or the districts, existing districts, to turn that over. So it's more of a financial consideration, I think, or geography is how far the pipe is away. So I think part of that large master plan community is that's kind of what happens, and then they turn the assets over to a city utility or whatever.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Had a question. They referenced the 8,500 acres south of baseline. I would assume, I guess, that that is going to be a master planned community, right? Okay, so I have heard others say that there is a concern that by developing that and having that as a master plan community, it will eventually detract from the Apache Trail and the appeal of that, because there'll be business and there'll be commercial down there, and it will actually detract from what we've always had here, because it'll be newer, fresher, all that. Is there any studying, any concern that that's gonna happen?
There could be validity to that. I guess it just depends on how, you know, the city council reacts to that. The one discussion that's been had, and it's more of internal, but because there's new growth and development down there, I think the city council, because it's general fund revenue, could say, okay, we're gonna get all this growth revenue, and when sales tax comes in, we're just gonna peel off a little bit of it and make sure it's spent, you know, north of Broadway or in this geographic area. So I think the city has tools to do that.
Okay, well, that would make sense.
And again, maybe that's how Gilbert's been successful, because it's a magnet for growth, so they have a lot of revenue coming in. And so maybe they've decided as a council to say, okay, 0.5% or some percent, you know, we're gonna, because the city doesn't really have a lot of tools to do that.
I imagine that's kind of common, isn't it, though? Because even if you take a city like Scottsdale, you know, you've got the old Scottsdale, and then as growth moved and you got newer developments, don't they do things like that to?
That's why you have to improve
It's
the downtown.
Yeah, where you want to have an emphasis. So you say, okay, we have this revenue stream that we're gonna harness that, if you will, and put it where we think it's needed most, or a portion of it.
So it doesn't have
I
to.
thought we
be
did reference
everything.
that. Didn't we talk about that in the economic development element? It seems like deja vu all over again.
Madam Chair.
The tale of the two
Yes, we
cities,
did.
I think.
We did talk about
Yep.
the two cities within one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, that we did, yeah.
We
I
did
just,
it.
my only concern was that it would, if we can't get this, or the trail, you know, if we can't get it upgraded and make it
It's never gonna
appealing.
happen, right?
Yeah,
And maybe
then-
this is the tool to make that happen.
I
Yeah,
think so,
yeah.
yeah.
I think that-
Have to have that revenue stream to start
You got
making
it,
those improvements.
Got
Right.
to have the gas in order to make the automobile go.
right, yeah. Yep.
Okay, any more questions on
I-
10?
Madam Chair, one more question I have. So on the financial mechanisms,
Yeah.
the dedicated transactions / sales tax, the second item, so that's obviously the 0.4% is, I guess, primarily for the PSPRS. Now, I know the state of Arizona, there's a substantial amount of unfunded liability. I don't know what Apache Junction's stake in that is. Is there still a fair amount of unfunded liability?
There is. I forget what year we're supposed to break even on that. But it's common in every city, and
know.
they're setting
They're all
aside money to pay for it.
All struggling.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much money that is. It's for the retirement of police officers, and other cities for fire departments. We don't have a fire we have a fire district, but that's not our city money, so,
Yeah.
so that's
Is
good.
that 0.4%, is that making a
Point two.
dent?
.2, yeah.
Right now, it's point two.
Oh, it says 0.4% for public safety. I'm sorry.
It should say point two. And for road maintenance, so
Yeah.
ours is 2.4, so 2 is general, point 2 is road.
Oh, and 0.2.
Oh,
the other.
it's a
Okay,
0.4
I
for
got it,
both.
I got it, okay, right.
Okay.
So in Payson, they passed a 0.75.
Just for the PSPRS?
And I
Holy
think in Prescott, it was like a 0.5, just to kind of catch up.
I know, well,
And maybe that's where this idea came to the point 2, but
yeah,
some cities maybe have it worse than others for whatever reason. I don't know the ins and outs of it all, but
it's a
Actually,
shame, but
there
it's.
was discussion about 10 years ago about this very thing, as far as bumping up for public safety to 0.5,
Was there,
or between 0.25 and 0.5.
yeah, it's,
so I think in the paper, it said that we have put in 2.6 million this year. I think the newspaper.
that's a 0.2 in sales tax?
No, I think it's general fund, so like
Oh.
if the city's revenue goes up
Oh, they
Oh.
contribute some,
organically or naturally, some of that
wow.
comes there, and then I think the point 2 generated $1 million, and I don't know where the other million came from, but I think the newspaper said we were putting in 2.6
Wow.
this year.
That's
Now,
So they're
that,
trying to
pretty
get
good.
ahead of
Yeah,
it,
that's some, I'm impressed.
but,
that 0.4 is that part of that 2.4, right?
correct.
Yes.
It's not, that's the 0.4 of the
Yeah, the
2.4.
2.4 at the top, the
Okay, it's
first
not
one,
2.4 and 0.4
Nope.
for a total of 2.8. Okay,
2.4.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to
Yeah, okay.
make sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anything else? That's about it then, right?
Correct. So those are, we finished the chapters. We have Chapter 11, Land Use, and Chapter 12, the Intergovernmental Cooperation element, left. And then we have Part 3, amending the general plan, and then the implementation of the general plan. So we have a meeting next Tuesday, and I think we have the option to possibly discuss those. It's really three chapters. Part 3, we could really count that as one. They're pretty short and straightforward. It's really the administrative part of the general plan. So I think that could go rather quickly. And then we also, on Tuesday, we have the option to meet on Thursday if needed to talk about the general plan as well.
So you want us to read 11 and 12?
And the implementation?
Implementation is pretty much verbatim of what it is today in the
Yeah.
current plan, so that
Right.
really isn't changing, because the process is the same and kind of dictated by state law and how to do amendments.
That's
Can we do
right.
that tonight, then?
Huh?
You can if you want, you can, we're here
We
till
have
9.
an hour.
I was told we got
More?
a curfew at 9, is what I was told.
I'd rather push on and do some more
Fine
tonight.
with me.
Well, land use, I think you want to spend some time on all by itself, so we can,
Yeah, but some of the
I haven't
easier.
read it.
oh, you haven't read it?
No.
Okay.
No.
No.
No, that's my,
But if
Okay.
if we want to go, wait a minute.
That's your homework?
If we want to go over it, we'd have to do more reading and discussing paragraph by paragraph, because if we haven't read it,
At
I
least
don't
we
have
knock
any
some of it out.
questions.
Well, I can just tell you for sure, plan implementation is exactly how, there's nothing changed in there from 10 years ago, but you can still look through it. So what Sydney was saying is on the agenda for Tuesday nights, our regular meeting, we have a city-initiated rezoning, that's a pretty simple one, and we have the arts ordinance, which is always fun. And then after that, if you want, we can finish up if you like on Tuesday night. Otherwise, Tuesday night, you have to make a motion to have a meeting on Thursday,
Oh, if we need it,
if you need it.
right,
Madam
Yeah.
Chair,
yes.
if I recall, we didn't really have a whole lot of members of the public to speak on the public hearing for the arts last time around.
Well, we're having a public hearing on the 27th. So we're having a work session. I'm not going to be here Tuesday, but Heather's going to be here. She'll walk you through it, and then we put another ad in the paper to go to August 27th is the actual public hearing, the noticed public hearing for the arts. So Tuesday night's like another work session on the arts. The 27th at the regular meeting is the public hearing, and then the 17th of September at the council is a public hearing on the arts.
So what I'm hearing is, and what I saw on the agenda for Tuesday night, is that we will probably knock that out
In a
easy.
half
Pretty
hour,
quick.
probably.
So we
Very
can read
quickly,
this till
so
Tuesday.
that would give us the opportunity to
Read
get
it.
that.
Okay.
Rather than go for next Thursday, we could just knock it all out
Um,
and probably still be done by 9 o'clock or
Yeah.
maybe just a little bit
Agreed?
after.
Agreed.
Agreed?
I'm good with that.
Agreed?
Do we need to vote on that or anything, or we'll just?
No, not tonight. Again, on Tuesday night, it's already gonna be on the agenda, and then you'll know at the end of the meeting on Tuesday night whether you gotta have a Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So because it's not, that's not currently on Thursday night's or Tuesday night's agenda for discussing the general plan, is it?
Yep, we put it on there.
Oh, there it is, I'm sorry, I missed it.
And in the future meetings, it's set up, again, you can decide what dates you want.
okay. Then, since everybody's in agreement, I guess I will adjourn this meeting at about 3 minutes to 8. Unless I hear any objection. Not for me. Adjourn.